The flames that consumed Olivia Kane's wagon turned the winter night into a hellscape of orange and black. The canvas cover curling inward like dying petals while everything she owned in this world disappeared into ash and smoke. She stood 20 feet away in the bitter cold, her thin shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, watching the destruction with eyes that had already cried themselves dry over the past 6 months. The other wagons in the winter camp formed a loose circle around the edge of the clearing, their occupants emerging to witness the disaster, but keeping their distance as if her misfortune might be contagious. Olivia had joined this westward-bound group 3 weeks ago in Wyoming territory, the only woman traveling alone, and she knew what they whispered about her. A widow at 22 with no family, no prospects, heading to California on little more than hope and stubbornness. The December wind cut through her dress like a knife, and she realized with growing numbness that she was shaking violently, not just from shock, but from the dropping temperature. The fire had started from her cooking stove, a moment of carelessness when exhaustion had finally caught up with her. She had been trying to warm some beans for supper when she nodded off, and the next thing she knew, flames were racing up the canvas walls. "Get back, everyone back!" someone shouted, though the warning was unnecessary. The fire was contained to her wagon alone, and the snow-covered ground would prevent it from spreading. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, her teeth chattering so hard she bit her tongue. The irony was not lost on her that she was freezing while watching fire destroy everything. Her spare dresses, her mother's Bible, the wedding ring from her brief marriage to Thomas Kane, the daguerreotype of her parents, the seed money she had saved for a new start. All of it gone, Miss Kane. The voice came from behind her, deep and steady. "You need to get warm." She turned to find a tall man approaching, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. She recognized him as one of the cowboys hired to help guide the wagon train and manage the livestock. He had kept mostly to himself during the journey, and she had caught his name only once. Jackson something. He was perhaps 25 or 26, lean and weathered in the way of men who lived their lives outdoors. "My wagon," she said stupidly, gesturing at the inferno. "I can see that." He was already shrugging out of his heavy sheepskin coat. "But you will be dead before morning if you do not get warm. Put this on." "I cannot take your coat," Olivia protested, even as another violent shiver ran through her. "You will freeze." "I have another blanket in my bedroll and I will be near the fire. You have nothing." His tone left no room for argument. He draped the coat over her shoulders, and the weight of it, still warm from his body, made her want to weep with relief. "Come on, you can share my fire tonight. The others," she began, "will do nothing to help you, as they have made clear." There was an edge to his voice now. "I will not watch a woman freeze to death because of propriety." He was right. Already the other families were retreating to their own wagons, the spectacle over. The wagon master, a gruff man named Hendricks, gave her a brief nod but offered nothing else. She was a liability now, a burden they would likely vote to leave behind come morning. Jackson led her to his campsite on the far edge of the circle, where a small fire burned between carefully placed stones. His bedroll was spread nearby, and his saddle served as a pillow. A painted horse was tethered to a nearby tree, watching them with intelligent eyes. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to a log near the flames. "I will get more wood." Olivia sank onto the log, pulling his coat tighter around herself. It smelled of leather and smoke and something else, something clean like sage. Her mind was racing, trying to calculate her options and finding none. She had no money, no supplies, no way forward and no way back. The wagon train was wintering here in this valley in Utah territory, just north of a small settlement called Beaver. They would not move on until late March or April when the mountain passes cleared. That was 4 months away. 4 months with nothing. Jackson returned with an armful of wood and began building up the fire. In the growing light, she could see him more clearly. He had a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes the color of river stones. There was a scar along his left cheekbone, pale against his tanned skin. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for the coat, for this." He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the fire. "You should try to sleep. We will figure out what to do in the morning." "There is nothing to figure out." Olivia heard the defeat in her own voice. "I have no wagon, no supplies, no money. The train will leave me here. Then you will come to Beaver with me." He said it matter-of-factly, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. She stared at him. "What?" "I am heading to Beaver tomorrow anyway. I only signed on with this train to get here. There is a ranch that needs hands, and I aim to work through the winter." He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the dark sky. "The town is small, but they might need someone to help with cooking or laundry or teaching. Better than freezing out here." "You do not even know me," Olivia said, bewildered by his casual offer. "I know you have had a terrible night and need help." Jackson finally looked at her fully, his gaze direct and honest. "And I know what it is like to have nothing and nowhere to go." Something in his voice told her he was speaking from experience. She wanted to ask, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that she was warm. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was fading fast. "You should sleep," he said again. "Take the bedroll, I will keep watch." "I cannot take your bed too," she protested weakly. "Yes, you can." He stood and pulled a thick blanket from his saddlebag. "I have slept in worse conditions." "Rest, Miss Kane." She was too tired to argue further. Olivia moved to the bedroll and lay down, still wrapped in his coat. The wool blankets beneath her were rough but blessedly warm. She thought she would lie awake all night, her mind churning with worry, but sleep pulled her under within minutes. She woke to the smell of coffee and the pale light of dawn. Her body ached from sleeping on the ground, and for a moment she could not remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The fire, the loss, the stranger's kindness. Jackson was crouched by the fire, pouring coffee from a battered pot into a tin cup. He looked as though he had not slept at all. "Morning," he said, offering her the cup. "It is not much, but it will warm you." Olivia sat up, accepting the coffee gratefully. The bitter liquid burned her throat, but she did not care. Across the camp, she could see the blackened skeleton of her wagon, still smoking faintly in the morning air. "The wagon master came by an hour ago," Jackson said, anticipating her question. "He said the train will not wait. They are pulling out in 2 days, heading south before turning west again." "And me," he suggested, "you stay in Beaver and find work, or marry." Jackson's expression was neutral, but she caught the disapproval in his tone. He was not unkind about it, but he made it clear you are on your own. Olivia nodded slowly. She had expected nothing different. "You still plan to go to Beaver today?" "Yes, and you are welcome to ride with me if you want. My horse can carry double for the distance." He paused. "It is not much of a town, but it is better than nothing." "Why are you helping me?" The question came out more bluntly than she intended. "You owe me nothing." Jackson was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. 2 years ago, I was in a bad way. Someone helped me when they did not have to. I figure I am just passing that along." There was more to the story she could tell, but she did not press. Instead, she asked, "What is your full name? I realized I do not even know who I am trusting my life to." "Jackson Xander," he said. "Most people call me Jack." "Olivia Kane," she replied, though he clearly already knew. "Most people used to call me Liv, but that was a long time ago." "Liv suits you better than Olivia," he observed. "Softer." She was not sure how to take that, so she simply sipped her coffee. The camp around them was coming to life, families emerging from their wagons to start breakfast fires and tend to animals. A few curious glances came their way, but no one approached. "I should gather anything salvageable from my wagon," Olivia said, though the thought of sorting through the ruins made her stomach turn. "Already did," Jackson said. He pointed to a small pile nearby. There was not much. Some tin plates, a pot, a knife. The metal box in the back was damaged, but what was inside survived. Her heart leaped. The box! I did not open it. Figured it was personal. Olivia scrambled to the pile and found her mother's small metal strongbox, the paint blackened and peeling but the contents inside protected. She opened it with shaking hands. The wedding ring was there, along with 3 $20 gold pieces she had hidden in a false bottom, her emergency fund. And beneath that, the daguerreotype, its glass cracked but the image still visible. Her parents stared out at her, frozen in time. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. The money changed everything. It was not a fortune, but it was something. A cushion. Options. Jackson tactfully looked away while she composed herself. When she had tucked the box safely into the pocket of her dress, he said, "We should leave within the hour if you are coming. I want to reach Beaver before dark." "I am coming," Olivia said firmly. "And Jack, thank you for everything." He gave her a brief nod, his expression still carefully neutral. "You would have done the same." She was not sure that was true, but she appreciated the sentiment. They broke camp quickly, Jackson rolling his bedroll and securing his gear with practiced efficiency. Olivia helped where she could, still wearing his coat because he insisted she keep it until they reached town. The wagon master stopped by to offer his official condolences and a half-hearted suggestion that perhaps Olivia could catch up with them in the spring if she found means to outfit herself again. They both knew it was an empty platitude. When they were ready, Jackson swung up onto his horse, a sturdy paint with a calm temperament, and then reached down to pull Olivia up behind him. She hesitated, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the arrangement, but there was no other choice. She grasped his hand, surprised by the strength in it, and let him pull her up. She settled behind the saddle, acutely aware of how close they were, how she had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from falling. "Hold tight," he said. "It is about 15 miles and the trail can be rough." The horse moved forward at a steady walk, and Olivia looked back once at the wagon train that was supposed to carry her to a new life. Instead, she was trusting a stranger, heading to a tiny town in the middle of Utah Territory in the dead of winter with nothing but the clothes on her back and $60 to her name. The ride to Beaver took most of the day. The landscape was beautiful in its starkness, the valley floor covered in snow with mountains rising on either side like ancient sentinels. Jackson did not talk much, but it was a comfortable silence rather than an awkward one. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks or warn her about a rough patch in the trail. By mid-afternoon, Olivia's body was aching from the unfamiliar position and the cold, despite the heavy coat. She tried not to complain, but Jackson must have sensed her discomfort because he stopped beside a small creek to let the horse drink and give them a chance to stretch. "How are you holding up?" he asked as she slid down from the horse, her legs nearly buckling. "I have been better," she admitted, stamping her feet to get the blood flowing. "But I have also been worse." He handed her a piece of jerky from his saddlebag. "Eat something. We have another few hours yet." They stood by the creek in the pale winter sunlight, chewing the tough meat in silence. Olivia studied him when she thought he was not looking. There was something solid about Jackson Zander, something steady. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, but there was a wariness in his eyes that spoke of hard lessons learned. "Can I ask what you did before this?" she ventured. "Before signing on with the Wagon train, ranching mostly, herding cattle, breaking horses, whatever work I could find." He glanced at her. "I have been moving around since I was 18, no real home to speak of. No family." His jaw tightened. Not anymore. The finality in his tone told her not to push further. She understood. She had her own painful topics she preferred to avoid. "What about you?" he asked. "What were you running from, or running to?" It was the first personal question he had asked, and she appreciated that he framed it as a choice. Running from or running to? Both, really. "My husband died 8 months ago," she said quietly. "Typhoid. We had only been married a year. His family never approved of me, and after he passed, they made it clear I was not welcome. I had nowhere else to go, and I had always heard California was a place where people could start fresh. So I sold what little I had and bought a wagon and supplies." She laughed bitterly. "I guess that did not work out." "I am sorry," Jackson said, and he sounded like he meant it. "About your husband. Thank you. He was a good man, gentle." She looked down at her hands. "I cared for him very much, but it was not a grand passion, if that makes sense. More of a partnership. A friendship. He was the school teacher in our town, and I helped him with the younger children. When he asked me to marry him, it seemed like the sensible thing to do. I had no other prospects, and he was kind." "Kindness counts for a lot," Jackson said quietly. "It does," she agreed. "But I think we both knew we married for practical reasons more than romantic ones. Still, I would give anything to have him back. He did not deserve to die so young." They were quiet for a moment, the only sound the burble of the creek and the soft huffing of the horse. "We should keep moving," Jackson finally said. "I want to get you somewhere warm before nightfall." The town of Beaver appeared in the distance as the sun was beginning to set. A small collection of buildings clustered along a main street with a few scattered houses beyond. It was not impressive, but to Olivia it looked like salvation. As they rode down the main street, she could see a general store, a church, a saloon, a livery stable, and what appeared to be a boarding house. A few people were out despite the cold, and they watched curiously as Jackson rode past with a woman clinging to his back. He stopped in front of the boarding house, a 2-story structure that had seen better days but appeared solid enough. "Mrs. Patterson runs this place," he said, helping Olivia down. "She is tough but fair. Tell her you need a room and work and mention that I sent you. She might give you a chance." "Where will you be?" Olivia asked, suddenly panicked at the thought of being alone. "I am heading to the ranch just outside of town, the Morrison place. They are expecting me." He hesitated, then added, "But I will come back in a few days to check on you, make sure you are settled. You do not have to do that, I know." He handed her $2 silver. "For the room tonight and tomorrow, until you can figure things out." "Jack, I cannot." "Yes, you can." His tone was firm. "You have money, but you should not let people know that, not yet. Keep it hidden until you know who to trust." It was good advice, and she knew it. She took the coins, her throat tight. "I do not know how to thank you." "No need." He tipped his hat to her. "Good luck, Liv." He rode away before she could say anything else, disappearing down the street toward the edge of town. Olivia stood there for a moment, clutching the coins and feeling suddenly very alone. Then she squared her shoulders, climbed the steps to the boarding house, and knocked on the door. A woman in her 50s answered, her gray hair pulled into a severe bun and her eyes sharp as she looked Olivia up and down. "Can I help you, Mrs. Patterson? My name is Olivia Kane. Jackson Zander said you might have a room available. I can pay." She held up the coins. The woman's expression softened slightly at the mention of Jackson's name. "That boy has a good heart. Come in out of the cold and we will talk." The interior of the boarding house was plain but clean, with a small parlor to the left and a narrow staircase leading up. Mrs. Patterson led her to the parlor where a fire burned in the hearth. "Sit," she instructed. "You look half frozen. Where did you come from?" Olivia explained her situation as briefly as possible: the wagon train, the fire, Jack's assistance. Mrs. Patterson listened without interruption, her face unreadable. "So you have no belongings except what you are wearing," she said when Olivia finished. "Essentially, yes. Though the coat belongs to Jack, I need to return it to him. Keep it for now. He has another." Mrs. Patterson studied her for a long moment. "I have a room available. $2 a week, including breakfast and supper. If you want to work off part of the cost, I can use help with laundry and cleaning. The winters are slow, but come spring, I get more boarders passing through." "I can work," Olivia said quickly. "I am not afraid of hard work." "Good, you will start tomorrow. For tonight, just rest. You look exhausted." The older woman stood. "Come on, I will show you your room." The room was small, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand, but it was clean and had a window that overlooked the street. To Olivia, it was a palace. "Thank you," she said. "I will not be a burden, I promise." "See that you are not, Mrs. Patterson said, but there was no real harshness in her tone. "Supper is in an hour. Come down when you hear the bell." When she was alone, Olivia sat on the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. She had survived the worst night of her life and made it to some semblance of safety. It was not California, and it was not the new start she had imagined, but it was something. And she owed it all to a cowboy she barely knew. The next few days passed in a blur of hard work. Mrs. Patterson put her to work washing linens, scrubbing floors, and helping prepare meals. The labor was exhausting, but Olivia welcomed it. It kept her mind occupied and her hands busy, leaving no time to dwell on everything she had lost. The boarding house had 3 other residents. An elderly prospector named Gus, who spent most of his time muttering about silver veins, a traveling salesman who was only there a few nights before moving on, and a quiet young man named Robert who worked at the general store. Olivia kept mostly to herself, speaking when spoken to, but offering little about her past. The town was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and she had no desire to be the subject of gossip more than necessary. True to his word, Jackson appeared at the boarding house 3 days after he had left her there. Olivia was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, despite the freezing temperature, when she heard Mrs. Patterson call her name. "You have a visitor," the older woman said with a knowing look. Olivia hurried inside, her hands red from the cold water, and found Jackson waiting in the parlor. He looked the same, perhaps a bit more rested, and he stood when she entered. "Liv," he said with a nod. "You are looking better." "Thanks to you." She glanced down at the coat she was still wearing. "I should return this. Keep it through the winter. I told you I have another." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "I wanted to make sure you were managing all right. Mrs. Patterson has been very kind. I have a room and work. It is more than I had hoped for." She hesitated, then added, "Will you sit?" "Can I get you some coffee?" He sat, and she poured coffee from the pot that was always warming on the stove. They settled into the chairs by the fire, a respectable distance apart. "How is the ranch work?" she asked. "Good. Hard, but good. Mr. Morrison is a fair man, and the pay is decent. I am bunking with the other hands in the barn loft, but it is warm enough." He sipped his coffee. "The plan is to stay through the winter and then maybe move on in the spring. We will see." "Always moving," she observed. "It is what I know." He looked at her over the rim of his cup. "What about you? Will you stay here or try to catch another wagon train west come spring?" It was a question she had been asking herself. "I do not know yet. I need to save money first, and I need to figure out what I actually want." California was just a destination, a place to go, but I never thought about what I would do when I got there. Sometimes the journey matters more than the destination, Jackson said. They talked for an hour, the conversation coming easier than Olivia would have expected. Jackson told her about the ranch, about the cattle they were trying to keep fed through the winter, about Mr. Morrison's daughter Emma, who was 16 and horse crazy. Olivia told him about the boarding house residents and Mrs. Patterson's strict rules about no alcohol and no visitors after 8 in the evening. When he finally stood to leave, Olivia felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "I will come by again if that is all right," he said. "Maybe next week." "I would like that," she replied, meaning it. He did come by the next week, and the week after that. His visits became a regular occurrence, every 5 or 6 days when he had time off from the ranch. Sometimes they sat in the parlor and talked. Sometimes they walked through the town together, Olivia pointing out the people she had met and Jackson sharing stories from his travels. Mrs. Patterson noticed, of course. "That young man is sweet on you," she said one evening after Jackson had left. Olivia felt her face heat. "We are just friends. For now, maybe. But I have seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, and the way you look at him too, for that matter." Olivia wanted to deny it, but she could not. Somewhere over the past month, Jackson Xander had become important to her. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing, looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that felt dangerously close to something more than friendship. But she also knew the reality of her situation. She was a widow with nothing to her name, dependent on the charity of others. Jackson was a drifter with no roots, a man who had made it clear he did not stay in one place for long. Whatever was growing between them had no future, or so she told herself. Winter deepened, bringing heavy snows that made travel difficult. Jackson's visits became less frequent, not because he wanted them to be, but because the ranch work was demanding and the weather made the journey into town treacherous. But he always came when he could, sometimes arriving covered in snow, his face red from the cold. One evening in late January, he showed up at the boarding house just as supper was being served. Mrs. Patterson, who had developed a soft spot for him, insisted he join them. They sat around the table with Gus and Robert, eating Mrs. Patterson's hearty beef stew and fresh bread. "The Morrison Ranch is having a barn dance next Saturday," Jackson said casually as he buttered a piece of bread. "Mr. Morrison does it every year to break up the winter monotony. All the local families come. There will be music and dancing and food." He glanced at Olivia. "Would you like to go with me?" The room went quiet. Gus stopped mid-slurp and Robert's eyes widened. Mrs. Patterson busied herself with serving more stew, but Olivia could see the smile she was trying to hide. "I do not know how to dance," Olivia said, her heart pounding. "Not really. My husband tried to teach me once, but I was terrible at it." "I am not much better," Jackson admitted. "But it might be fun anyway. A chance to get out and see something besides the same 4 walls." "Then yes," Olivia said. "I would like that very much." The smile that spread across Jackson's face made her stomach flip in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. The week leading up to the dance passed agonizingly slowly. Olivia had exactly one dress that was suitable for any kind of social occasion, a dark blue wool that had been spared from the fire only because she had been wearing it that night. Mrs. Patterson helped her alter it slightly, taking it in at the waist and adding a bit of lace at the collar from her own scrap bag. "You look lovely," the older woman declared on Saturday afternoon as Olivia studied herself in the small mirror. "That boy will not be able to take his eyes off you." "Mrs. Patterson," Olivia protested, embarrassed. "Oh, hush. You are young and you have been through a terrible loss. There is nothing wrong with finding happiness again. She squeezed Olivia's shoulder. Your late husband would want you to live, not just survive. The words struck deep because Olivia knew they were true. Thomas had been a practical man, and he would have wanted her to move forward, to find joy where she could. Jackson arrived in a borrowed wagon just before sunset, looking clean-shaven and nervous. He was wearing a dark coat and a clean shirt, his hair actually combed for once. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "You clean up well yourself," she replied. The ride to the Morrison Ranch took about 40 minutes, the wagon jolting over the rutted road while they made small talk about inconsequential things. But beneath the surface, Olivia could feel the tension, the awareness that this was different from their other meetings. This was a date, an intentional courtship, and they both knew it. The ranch was ablaze with light when they arrived, lanterns hung everywhere, and a large bonfire burning in the yard. The barn doors were thrown open, and Olivia could hear music drifting out, fiddles and guitars and the stomp of dancing feet. Jackson helped her down from the wagon, his hands steady at her waist. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be." The barn had been transformed for the occasion. The dirt floor swept clean and the stalls temporarily emptied. Long tables were set up along one wall, laden with food, and at the far end, a group of musicians played while couples whirled across the makeshift dance floor. Jackson introduced her to Mr. Morrison, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes, and his wife Sarah, who welcomed Olivia warmly. Their daughter Emma immediately attached herself to Olivia, peppering her with questions about where she came from and what it was like traveling in a wagon train. "Emma, let the poor woman breathe," Mrs. Morrison said with a laugh, pulling her daughter away. Jackson got them both cups of punch and found a relatively quiet corner where they could watch the dancers. Olivia recognized a few faces from town, but most of the people were ranchers and farmers from the surrounding area. "You want to dance?" Jackson asked after they had been there for a while. "I thought you said you were not good at it," Olivia teased. "I am not, but I am willing to make a fool of myself if you are." She laughed and let him lead her onto the floor. The current dance was a lively reel, and they stumbled through it, laughing when they turned the wrong way or stepped on each other's feet. Olivia could not remember the last time she had laughed so freely, without the weight of grief pressing down on her. When a slower song started, Jackson pulled her closer, one hand at her waist and the other holding hers. They swayed together, not really following any particular steps, just moving to the music. "Thank you," Olivia said softly. "For this, for everything." "You do not need to keep thanking me, Liv." "Yes, I do. You saved my life that night. I would have frozen if not for you. And you have made this winter bearable for me," Jackson replied. "I have spent the last 2 years moving from place to place, never staying long enough to form connections. It gets lonely after a while, but talking with you, spending time with you, it has reminded me what I have been missing." Her breath caught. "Jack, I know this is complicated," he continued. "I know you are still grieving your husband, and I know I am just a drifter with no prospects. But I care about you, Liv, more than I probably should." "I care about you too," she whispered, "more than I expected to." They were still swaying to the music, but neither of them was paying attention to it anymore. Jackson's gray eyes were locked on hers, and she could see her own conflicted feelings reflected back at her. "I do not want to hurt you," he said, "and I do not want to dishonor your husband's memory. Thomas has been gone for 8 months. I will always love the memory of who he was, but he is gone, and I am still here, still living." She took a shaky breath. "And you are not dishonoring anything. You are giving me a reason to keep going when I had none." The song ended, but they stood there for a moment longer, the noise and crowd fading into the background. Then Jackson stepped back, breaking the spell. "I should get you something to eat," he said. "Mrs. Morrison makes the best apple pie in the territory." They spent the rest of the evening eating and talking and occasionally dancing, though Olivia was hyper-aware of Jackson's presence beside her now. Every accidental brush of hands felt charged with meaning. On the ride back to Beaver, they sat close together on the wagon seat, sharing Jackson's blanket against the cold. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the snow-covered landscape. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia ventured. "You said you have been moving around since you were 18. What happened to your family?" Jackson was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he sighed. "My father was a drunk and a mean son of a bitch. He beat my mother regularly, and he took his anger out on me and my younger sister too. When I was 17, I tried to stop him during one of his rages, and he came at me with a knife. We fought, and I ended up breaking his arm. He told me if I did not leave, he would have me arrested for assault." "Oh, Jack," Olivia breathed. "So I left. I wanted to take my sister with me, but she was only 14 and I had no way to care for her. I thought maybe if I left, he would calm down, that maybe without me there to provoke him, things would get better." His voice was rough with old pain. 2 months later, I got word that he had killed my mother in a drunken rage and then shot himself. My sister ended up with an aunt who wanted nothing to do with me. I tried to contact her a few times over the years, but she never responded. I do not even know where she is now. "I am so sorry," Olivia said, reaching for his hand. "That is not your fault, none of it. I know that up here." He tapped his head. "But knowing and feeling are different things. I have spent the last 8 years trying to outrun the guilt, but it follows me everywhere." "Is that why you keep moving?" "Partly. It is hard to stay in one place when you are always waiting for things to go wrong." He squeezed her hand. "But lately, I have been thinking maybe it is time to stop running. Maybe it is time to try putting down roots somewhere." "Here?" she asked hopefully. "Maybe. If I had a reason to stay." They looked at each other, and Olivia felt the shift between them, the acknowledgement of what was building. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. When they reached the boarding house, Jackson walked her to the door. They stood on the porch, breath misting in the cold air. "Good night, Liv," he said softly. "Good night, Jack." He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. It was chaste and respectful, but it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Then he was gone, climbing back onto the wagon and disappearing into the night. Olivia stood on the porch for a long moment after he left, her fingers pressed to her forehead where his lips had been, and allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She was falling in love with Jackson Xander. The realization should have frightened her, but instead, it felt like coming home. February arrived with brutal cold and heavy snows that buried the town for days at a time. Jackson could not make it into town for nearly 3 weeks, and Olivia found herself watching the window anxiously, worrying about him out at the ranch. When he finally appeared in mid-February, she nearly threw herself into his arms before remembering propriety. Mrs. Patterson, who had been watching from the kitchen, discreetly made herself scarce. "I was worried about you," Olivia admitted. "The snow was too deep to risk the trip," Jackson said, "but I thought about you every day." They settled into their usual spots by the fire, but the air between them was different now, charged with unspoken feelings. "Liv, I need to tell you something," Jackson said after a few minutes. "Mr. Morrison has offered me a permanent position at the ranch. Not just hired help, but a real job as his foreman. The current foreman is retiring in the spring, and he wants me to take over." "Jack, that is wonderful," Olivia exclaimed. "Are you going to accept?" "I want to. It is a good job, steady pay, a future. but it means staying here. Putting down roots, like I said. He paused. And before I accept, I need to know if you are planning to leave come spring, if you are still set on going to California. Her heart was pounding. Why would that matter to your decision? Because you matter to me, Liv. These past few months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has made me realize what I have been missing. I do not want to just drift anymore. I want to build something. And I want to build it with you if you will have me. Olivia's breath caught. What are you saying? Jackson stood and crossed to her, kneeling so they were at eye level. He took her hands in his. I am saying I love you. I know it has not been that long, and I know you might need more time, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. You have changed everything for me. I want to stay in Beaver. I want to make a life here, and I want you to be part of that life. Tears sprang to her eyes. I love you too, she whispered. I have been trying not to, trying to convince myself it was too soon or too complicated, but I cannot help it. You are the kindest, most honest man I have ever known, and yes, I want to build a life with you. The smile that broke across his face was like sunshine. Yeah, she confirmed, laughing through her tears. He stood, pulling her up with him, and then he kissed her properly. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, but when she leaned into him, it deepened. Olivia felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, her entire body alive with sensation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I know I do not have much to offer right now. Just the job and a room in the bunkhouse. But I will work hard and I will save money, and someday I will build you a real house. I promise I will take care of you and never let you want for anything. You could offer me nothing but yourself and it would be enough, Olivia said. Yes, I will marry you. They kissed again, and this time when Mrs. Patterson walked in and cleared her throat loudly, neither of them felt particularly embarrassed. I take it congratulations are in order. The older woman said dryly, but she was smiling. We are getting married, Jackson announced, his arm around Olivia's waist. Well, it is about time, Mrs. Patterson replied. I was beginning to think you would dance around it forever. When is the wedding? They looked at each other. Soon, Olivia suggested. As soon as possible, Jackson agreed. I do not want to wait. They settled on the first Saturday in March, which gave them 2 weeks to prepare. It would be a simple ceremony in the church with just a few guests, but Olivia did not care about the details. All that mattered was becoming Jackson's wife. The news spread through the small town quickly. Mrs. Patterson helped Olivia find fabric to make a simple wedding dress, and the ladies from the church offered to help with the sewing. Mr. Morrison gave Jackson his blessing and a raise, and he offered to host a small reception at the ranch after the ceremony. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Jackson came into town every chance he got, helping Olivia plan and sometimes just sitting with her, marveling at the fact that this was really happening. Are you sure about this? He asked one evening about a week before the wedding. You are giving up California, giving up your dreams. My dream was never really California, Olivia said. It was finding a place where I belonged, finding a home, and I have found that with you. You humble me, he said quietly. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this. I could never regret loving you, she replied. The night before the wedding, Olivia lay in her small room at the boarding house, trying to sleep but too excited and nervous to manage it. Tomorrow she would become Olivia Zander. Tomorrow she would start a new chapter of her life with a man who had saved her in more ways than one. She thought about the night her wagon burned, how she had stood there in the cold thinking her life was over. She had lost everything that night, but in losing everything, she had gained something far more valuable. She had gained Jackson. The wedding day dawned clear and cold. the sky a brilliant blue. Mrs. Patterson helped Olivia dress in the simple ivory gown they had made, and she lent her a lace veil that had been her own mother's. "You are a beautiful bride," Mrs. Patterson said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Jackson is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Olivia replied. The church was small but packed with people. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the wedding, curious about the widow who had arrived with nothing and was now marrying the cowboy who had helped her. But Olivia barely noticed the crowd. All she could see was Jackson standing at the altar in a new suit that he had clearly borrowed, his hair neatly combed and his eyes locked on her as she walked down the aisle. When she reached him, he took her hands, and she could feel them trembling slightly. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You are not so bad yourself," she whispered back. The ceremony was brief and simple. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson kissed her with such tenderness that Olivia felt tears slip down her cheeks. The reception at the Morrison Ranch was a lively affair with music and dancing and more food than Olivia had seen in months. Mr. Morrison gave a toast, welcoming Olivia to what he called the Morrison Ranch family, and Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. As the evening wore on, Jackson pulled Olivia aside. "I have something for you," he said. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a simple gold wedding band. "I know it is plain," he said, "but I saved up and I wanted you to have a ring, a symbol." "It is perfect," Olivia said, slipping it onto her finger next to Thomas's ring, which she had moved to her right hand that morning. "Thank you." "I have one more surprise," Jackson said, looking almost shy. "Mr. Morrison is letting us use his guest house tonight. It is not fancy, but it is private, and it is warm." The guest house was a small cabin about 100 yards from the main ranch house. Inside, someone had laid a fire in the hearth, and there was a bed piled high with quilts. When they were alone, the reality of what came next settled over them. Olivia felt suddenly nervous, aware that this was her second wedding night, but somehow it felt like the first. Her marriage to Thomas had been built on friendship and affection, and their physical relationship had been pleasant but unremarkable. This was different. This was passion and love and a desire that she had never experienced before. "We can take this slow," Jackson said, as if sensing her nerves. "There is no rush." "I am not nervous," Olivia lied. He smiled. "Yes, you are, and that is all right. I am nervous too." The honesty disarmed her. "You are. I want this to be good for you," he said. "I want to make you happy." "You already make me happy," she replied, "just by being you." She reached up and kissed him, and the nervousness melted away. What followed was tender and passionate, a slow exploration of each other that felt both new and familiar, as if they had been made for this moment. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. "I love you, Mrs. Xander," Jackson murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Xander," Olivia replied, and she had never meant anything more. The next morning they returned to town to begin their new life together. Jackson's room in the bunkhouse was not suitable for a married couple, so Mr. Morrison offered them a small house on the ranch property that had previously been used for storage. It was run down and needed work, but Jackson and Olivia threw themselves into making it a home. They spent their evenings scrubbing floors and mending walls, hanging curtains that Mrs. Patterson donated and arranging the few pieces of furniture they had managed to acquire. It was exhausting work, but Olivia had never been happier. As spring approached and the snow began to melt, Jackson was officially promoted to foreman. The job came with more responsibility and better pay, and for the first time in his life, he had money in the bank and a future that felt solid. "I have been thinking," he said one evening as they sat on the porch of their little house watching the sunset, "about building us a real house, something bigger with a proper kitchen and maybe a room for—" He trailed off, suddenly embarrassed. "For children," Olivia supplied, smiling. "Yeah. If that is something you want." "I want that very much," she said. "A family with you, a real home." He pulled her close and they sat in comfortable silence, dreaming about the future. By early summer, Olivia realized she was pregnant. The morning sickness and exhaustion were unmistakable, and when the doctor in town confirmed it, she could hardly contain her joy. She told Jackson that evening, nervous about how he would react. They had talked about children in abstract terms, but the reality was different. "Are you sure?" he asked, his eyes wide. The doctor confirmed it. "I am about 2 months along, so the baby should come in late December or early January." Jackson whooped and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are having a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Olivia asked. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," he replied. "You have given me everything, Liv. A home, a purpose, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Olivia found the summer heat exhausting. Jackson was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about her doing too much. Mr. Morrison's wife Sarah took Olivia under her wing, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes from when Emma was small. In August, Jackson surprised her by beginning construction on the new house. He had been saving every penny, and with help from some of the other ranch hands, he started building on a plot of land about a quarter-mile from the main ranch. "It will be done before the baby comes," he promised. "I want our child to come home to a real house, not a storage shed." He worked on it every spare moment, and Olivia watched in awe as the structure took shape. It was not a mansion, but it was sturdy and well-built, with 2 bedrooms and a large kitchen and a porch that faced the mountains. They moved in during October, just as the weather was starting to turn cold again. Olivia stood in the middle of their new home, her hand on her swollen belly, and felt overwhelming gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Jackson asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I am thinking about how much has changed in a year," she said. "Last winter I lost everything. I thought my life was over, and now look at us. We have a home and a baby on the way in each other. It feels like a miracle." "You are my miracle," Jackson said, turning her to face him. "You saved me just as much as I saved you that night. Maybe more." "We saved each other," Olivia corrected. Their son was born on a snowy evening in late December, just as the first anniversary of the night they met approached. The labor was long and difficult, but when Olivia finally held the tiny, squalling infant in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. "What should we name him?" Jackson asked, gazing at his son with undisguised adoration. "I was thinking maybe James," Olivia said. "After your middle name." "James Zander." Jackson's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "James, I like that. James it is." The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small joys. Jackson proved to be a devoted father, waking with Olivia for feedings and changing diapers without complaint. He would spend hours just watching the baby sleep, as if he could not quite believe this tiny person was real. By the time James was a year old, Olivia was pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous and more excited. Their daughter, Lily, was born in September of the following year, a calm baby with Jackson's gray eyes and Olivia's dark hair. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jackson continued to excel as foreman, and when Mr. Morrison decided to semi-retire a few years later, he offered Jackson a partnership in the ranch. It was an opportunity beyond anything Jackson had imagined, and he accepted with gratitude and determination to prove himself worthy of the trust. The years passed with the kind of quiet happiness that Olivia had never thought possible. They had 2 more children, a son named William and another daughter named Rose. The house that Jackson built expanded to accommodate the growing family, each addition built with his own hands. On winter evenings, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Jackson and Olivia would sit by the fire and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes they would reminisce about that first winter, about the night the wagon burned and how their lives had intersected in the most unlikely way. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had not stopped to help me that night?" Olivia asked one evening about 10 years into their marriage. "All the time," Jackson admitted. "And it terrifies me because I came so close to riding past. I almost did not stop. But you did. But I did. And it was the best decision I ever made." He reached for her hand, his thumb rubbing over her wedding band, which now had a matching one on his own finger. "You changed my life, Liv. You gave me a reason to stop running, a reason to hope. I do not know who I would be if I had not met you, but I know I would not be happy." "We were both lost," Olivia said, "and we found each other. That night in the cold, with nothing but ash and snow and fear, we found each other, and we built all of this." She gestured around their home, where evidence of their children was everywhere. Toys scattered near the hearth, small boots by the door, drawings pinned to the walls. "We built a good life," Jackson agreed. "A happy life." As the years continued to pass, Jackson and Olivia watched their children grow. James inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's gentle nature. Lily was fierce and independent, always asking questions and challenging the status quo. William was the quiet one, content to watch and listen and think. Rose was pure joy, lighting up every room she entered. The ranch prospered under Jackson's management, and he and Mr. Morrison eventually became equal partners. When Mr. Morrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, he left his half of the ranch to his daughter Emma, who by then had married and had children of her own. Emma and her husband worked the ranch alongside Jackson and Olivia, and the 2 families became deeply intertwined. Olivia often thought about the wagon train she had been traveling with, wondering if any of them had made it to California. She thought about Thomas sometimes too, with fondness and gratitude for the time they had shared, brief though it was. But her life was here now, with Jackson and their children and the land they had made their own. On a cold December evening, 20 years after they first met, Jackson surprised Olivia with a trip into town. "Where are we going?" she asked as they drove the familiar road. "You will see," he said mysteriously. He stopped in front of the boarding house, which Mrs. Patterson still ran, though she was well into her 70s now. The older woman was waiting on the porch, bundled in a thick coat. "About time you got here," she said with a smile. "Come on, then." She led them inside and up the stairs to the small room that had been Olivia's when she first arrived in Beaver. It looked much the same, though the wallpaper had been replaced and the furniture updated. "I do not understand," Olivia said. 20 years ago I came to this room with nothing," Jackson said. "You were alone and scared and had lost everything. This is where you started over. This is where your new life began." "Our new life," Olivia corrected gently. "Our new life," he agreed. "I wanted to bring you back here to remind us both of how far we have come, and to give you this." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a delicate gold necklace with a pendant in the shape of a wagon wheel. "I had it made special," he explained. to honor what you lost and what we gained. The wheel represents the wagon that burned, but also the journey that brought you to me. I want you to have it as a reminder that even our worst moments can lead to our greatest blessings." Olivia's eyes filled with tears as he fastened the necklace around her neck. "It is beautiful. You are beautiful. This life we have built is beautiful." "It is not over yet," Jackson said. "We have many more years ahead of us, God willing, many more adventures, many more memories," Olivia added. They thanked Mrs. Patterson, who waved them off with a tissue pressed to her eyes, and drove back to the ranch in comfortable silence. When they arrived home, they found their children waiting with a surprise of their own. They had prepared a special dinner to celebrate the anniversary of their parents' meeting. As they sat around the table, surrounded by the noise and chaos and love of their family, Olivia caught Jackson's eye and smiled. He smiled back, and in that moment, no words were needed. They both understood the miracle of what they had found. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Jackson and Olivia sat on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching the stars. "Tell me again," Olivia said, "about that night." It had become a tradition, this story. Jackson would tell it to the children sometimes, and they would listen with wide eyes, even though they had heard it dozens of times. "It was the coldest night I can remember," Jackson began, his voice falling into the familiar rhythm of the tale. "And I saw this wagon burning in the winter camp. The flames were so high they lit up the whole sky. And there was this woman standing there, shaking like a leaf, wearing nothing but a thin shawl. I knew if I did not do something, she would freeze before morning, so I gave her my coat." "And your last name," Olivia added softly, as she always did. "And my last name," Jackson agreed. "Though I did not know it yet, I thought I was just helping a stranger. I had no idea I was meeting my future wife, the mother of my children, the love of my life." "I had no idea either," Olivia said. "I thought I had lost everything, but really I had just cleared the way for something new, something better." "Do you ever regret not making it to California?" Jackson asked. It was a question he had asked before, but she never minded answering. "Not for a single moment," she replied firmly. "California was just a place on a map. But this, what we have here, this is home. This is where I was always meant to be." They sat in silence for a while, content in each other's presence. Finally, Jackson stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Zander. Let's go inside where it is warm." "In a moment," she said. "I just want to look at the stars a little longer." He settled back down beside her, and they watched the vast expanse of sky together. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and the wind whispered through the bare trees. It was a harsh landscape, unforgiving to those who were not prepared for it. But it was their landscape, their home. Olivia thought about the girl she had been 20 years ago, terrified and alone, watching her life go up in flames. That girl could never have imagined this future, this happiness. She had been so focused on her losses that she could not see the possibilities that lay ahead. But Jackson had seen them. He had looked at a desperate woman in the snow and seen someone worth saving. He had given her his coat to keep her warm and eventually his last name to give her a place in the world. And in return, she had given him a family, a home, a reason to believe in goodness again. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and crop failures, injuries and illnesses. But through it all, Jackson and Olivia faced everything together, their love the foundation upon which their entire life was built. Their children grew and married and had children of their own. James took over more of the ranch management as Jackson got older, proving himself to be every bit as capable and fair-minded as his father. Lily married a schoolteacher, and moved to Salt Lake City, where she became an advocate for women's education. William studied law and became a judge, known for his integrity and wisdom. Rose, the baby, surprised everyone by becoming a horse trainer, one of the few women in the profession. Jackson and Olivia became grandparents and then great-grandparents. Their house was always full of children of various ages, running and playing and filling the rooms with laughter. On special occasions, the whole family would gather, and Olivia would cook enormous meals while Jackson told stories about the old days. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. It seemed like half the territory showed up, people whose lives Jackson and Olivia had touched over the years. There were speeches and toasts, and more than a few tears. When it was Jackson's turn to speak, he stood and pulled Olivia to her feet beside him. 30 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, I met this woman on the worst night of her life. Her wagon had burned and she had lost everything. I gave her my coat because she was cold, and I gave her a ride to town because she had nowhere else to go. I did not know then that I was not rescuing her. I was the one being rescued. He turned to Olivia, taking both her hands in his. You saved me, Liv. You gave me a reason to stop running, a reason to believe I deserved happiness. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. You gave me everything. And I want you to know that every single day of these 30 years has been a gift. I love you more now than I did on the day we married, and I will love you until my last breath. There was not a dry eye in the house, including Olivia's. I love you too, she managed to say through her tears. Then, now, and always. They kissed to thunderous applause, and the party continued late into the night. But eventually, the guests went home, and Jackson and Olivia were alone again in the house that had sheltered them and their children for so many years. Tired? Jackson asked, helping her out of her party dress. Exhausted, Olivia admitted, but happy, so happy. They climbed into bed and Jackson pulled her close, her back against his chest the way they had slept for 30 years. Jack, she said softly, do you remember what you said to me that first night? When I asked why you were helping me. I said someone helped me once when I needed it, and I was passing it along. You never told me who helped you, Olivia said. All these years, and I never asked. Jackson was quiet for a moment. It was a rancher up in Wyoming. I was 19, desperate for work, and half-starved. He gave me a job and a place to stay and never asked questions about where I came from or why I was running. He treated me with respect and dignity when I deserved neither. When I left a year later, he told me that kindness was meant to be passed along, not paid back. I did not really understand what he meant until I met you. You passed it along, Olivia said, and we built something beautiful from it. We did, Jackson agreed. We really did. The next morning, they woke to find their youngest grandchildren had stayed over and were making breakfast. Well, attempting to make breakfast. There was flour everywhere, and one of the eggs had somehow ended up on the ceiling. But the children were so proud of their efforts that Jackson and Olivia ate every bite of the lumpy pancakes and overly salted eggs with genuine appreciation. This was their life now. Quieter in some ways, louder in others. Their bodies were not what they once were. Jackson's knees ached in the cold and Olivia needed glasses to read, but their love had not diminished. If anything, it had deepened with time, tempered and strengthened by all they had weathered together. They celebrated their 40th anniversary more quietly, just the two of them and their immediate family. 50 years brought a bigger celebration, with people coming from all over to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in the area. The story of the wagon that burned and the cowboy who gave the woman his coat and his last name had been told, and retold so many times it had taken on an almost mythical quality. But Jackson and Olivia knew the truth. There was no magic, no destiny, no divine intervention. There was just two broken people who chose to help each other, to love each other, to build something together out of the ashes of their old lives. Jackson passed away peacefully at the age of 79, surrounded by his family. Olivia held his hand as he took his last breath, and she whispered that she loved him, that she would see him again someday. His death left a hole in her heart that nothing could fill, but she did not regret a single moment of their time together. She had been blessed beyond measure to love and be loved by such a man. Olivia lived for another 5 years, spending her final days in the house Jackson built, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch and look out at the mountains, the gold wagon wheel necklace resting against her heart, and remember. She remembered the cold of that winter night, the terror of watching everything burn. She remembered the stranger who appeared out of the darkness with a coat and kindness. She remembered falling in love slowly, then all at once. She remembered building a life, brick by brick, moment by moment, choice by choice. When it was her time, Olivia went peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face. Her children found her in the morning, the necklace still around her neck and a letter on her nightstand addressed to all of them. In it, she had written about that night so long ago, about the wagon that burned and the cowboy who saved her. But she also wrote about the life they built together, about the importance of kindness and love, and choosing to hope even when everything seems lost. "Your father gave me his coat when I was freezing," she wrote. "And then he gave me his last name, his heart, and his whole life. In return, I gave him the same. We built something beautiful together, not because we were perfect, but because we chose each other every single day. That is the secret. Love is not a feeling that happens to you. It is a choice you make, over and over again. Choose wisely. Choose kindly. And if you are blessed enough to find someone who chooses you back, hold on to them with everything you have." The letter was read at her funeral, which was attended by more people than the little church could hold. Jackson and Olivia Zander had touched countless lives over the years, and the legacy of their love would continue for generations to come. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple but elegant. And on warm summer evenings, if you stood very still, you could almost hear the echo of their laughter carried on the wind, a reminder that even from the ashes of loss and despair, something beautiful can grow. The ranch continued to prosper under the management of their descendants, and the house Jackson built still stood strong, sheltering new generations of the family. The story of how it all began, of the wagon that burned in the winter camp and the cowboy who gave the woman his coat and his last name, became a cherished family legend, passed down with pride and wonder, because it was more than just a story. It was a testament to the power of kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative nature of love. It was proof that our darkest moments can lead to our brightest futures if we are brave enough to accept help and wise enough to offer it. And so the legacy lived on, a reminder that sometimes salvation comes not in the form we expect, but in the form we need. A coat against the cold, a name to call your own, a love to build a life upon. Jackson and Olivia had found all three in each other, on a freezing night in a winter camp, when her wagon burned and he chose to stop. And from that choice, from that moment of simple human kindness, an entire world was born. Their children made sure their story was preserved, written down and shared so it would never be forgotten. And every winter, on the anniversary of that fateful night, the family would gather at the house on the ranch, light a fire in the hearth, and remember the two people who had started it all. They would remember the wagon burning in the darkness, the desperate woman standing in the cold, and the cowboy who could have ridden past, but chose to stop. They would remember how he gave her his coat to keep her warm and his last name to give her a home. And they would remember that from that act of simple kindness, a love story for the ages was born, a love that lasted a lifetime, a love that created a family, a love that changed everything. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy Jackson and Olivia Xander could have left behind. Not wealth or status or fame, but the proof that love, real and true and lasting, was possible. That two people who had lost everything could find each other and build something beautiful. That kindness mattered. That hope was not foolish. That second chances were real. Their story ended as all stories must, with death and farewell. But it also never ended because the love they shared, the family they created, and the legacy they left behind continued on, a light in the darkness for anyone who needed to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. Somewhere in the winter night, a wagon burned, but from those ashes rose something eternal. Two hearts that beat as one, two lives woven together into something stronger than either could have been alone. Two souls that found their home in each other. Her wagon burned in the winter camp. The cowboy gave her his coat and his last name, and they lived, truly lived, happily ever after.